What up, Human Geo? We're doing this tonight. We're gonna go through everything. This is connecting the different video for me. Y'all ready? Let me hear you in the chat. How are you feeling? Scale of 1 to 5. If you had to take the Human Geo test tomorrow, what would you get? Where are we at? 2s, 3s, 4s. Not bad, not bad. Maybe barely a 5. Maybe all right. Human Geo is, I'm curious for you guys too. This is probably most of your first. Is this your first AP? Yes. Nah. Here's a poll. Looks like most of you guys, this is your first AP. So what makes human geography then the hardest of the APs is because it's your first. It's because this is your first, time through. We're just kind of figuring out, how do you learn this much information? How do you take a test that's 3 hours long? How do you remember all this stuff? This is all stuff that is hard the first time. And so the test itself, I don't think is one of the hardest tests. It's just this experience is going to be one of the hardest experiences you have. And then after this, it'll get easier because now you know what to expect. But the Human Geo test is pretty straightforward. I think that a lot of it is really just key terms. If you really know vocabulary, you're going to be fine. Because the multiple choice is very much like, do you know what these words mean? And the FRQ, same thing. They just kind of ask you to define them. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing a lot of tonight. Is I'm going to cut through the entire class. So we're going to go through all 7 units. I've got slides ready to go. We're going to explain out a bunch of things. And, the chat is for you guys to be talking about things. And you can ask any questions in the Ask a Question tab. And I'll go back and forth between slides and between answering your questions. And for those of you that want to watch this replay later, it will appear exactly where you're watching it right now in Fiveable. But you will need a Fiveable Plus membership to watch any replays. And we've been live every week for this entire year for Human Geography. So if you're trying to, binge watch some things this weekend, I highly recommend watching the replays because we're incredibly specific. We're human geography teachers that know exactly what you need to know, and we've cut through it straight away. There's slides up for every unit. And dope. So let's just see. Can I send you this presentation? And is there going to be a game? So we did some trivia before. We're having some technical difficulties. We're going to do more trivia games tomorrow and Sunday though. So I'm going to just delete that question. The presentation itself, yeah, I'll share this with you. Share. So you can follow along. Spread the word to your friends that I'm doing this right now. So there you go. You can click a little green button right below my screen. All right, so just make sure that in the chat, it's for you guys, but make sure that you are being, positive, appropriate, that you're supporting each other. We're going to be moderating the chat, so access denied. Okay, whoops. Let me just change the settings. I see. All right, there you go. Should be good now. You can refresh the slides. Yeah, all right. No worries. You're good now. Okay, and then I am going to, the slides will work now. Just refresh. My bad. We're just having one of those nights. Sometimes, everything you try to do is just not working. All right. Should be working now. All right, so We're doing all of human geography in about 2 hours. We might be done a little earlier, but I'll stick around to answer some of your questions. This weekend, we're doing a bunch of live streams. Dustin Fowler will be here. No, okay, so if you can't find the slides, click the button below my video. Oops. All right, so we'll have another AP Human Geography teacher live this weekend, tomorrow, Sunday, and Monday, with reviewing. Tomorrow is multiple choice, giving you tips and tricks for how to do the multiple choice questions. Then on Sunday is all about the FRQ. We're going to do some practice FRQ questions with you to make sure that you know the best strategies for answering the FRQ. On Monday, we're going to be doing some last minute, tips, tricks, strategies, last minute questions on Monday the night before your exam. And so you can join all of those things inside of 5 Plus. It's $5 for the month, and you can get access to all this stuff. So we're going to see you there, hopefully. Whoops. All right. And if you're not following us on Instagram, Twitter, get over there. We're doing all kinds of memes and stuff. So follow us, shout us out. Love to see it. This is only for, so we just opened this stream up, tonight's stream up, but the rest of the weekend is only for Plus members. So I wasn't able to get trivia running, so this is sort of like a peace offering. Okay. All right, so unlike any of the history classes, let me push this over. So make sure if you have questions, put them in the questions tab. Otherwise, I won't necessarily see them because you guys are kind of talking in the chat. I'm looking at my slides and looking at the video. So unlike some of the history classes, for human geography, you really should know. You got to know the geography of the world. You need to know, especially the regions. All of these regions will come up onto the exam in some way where they'll be named, and then even more specifically, you'll get countries that come up. But you gotta know these regions. The hardest thing, know your continents at the very least, and then you can get more specific into the regions. It's pretty much just kind of like north-south. The ones that tend to be more difficult are like sub-Saharan Africa. So just keep in mind that's underneath the Saharan Desert. The other ones, this is like more specific regions, and it's really, the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west. But just keep in mind a couple things, right? So keep in mind South Asia is India. This one gets students tripped up. So if you get a question about South Asia, you should know that that's where you're talking about India, Nepal, Bangladesh. It's not China, right? East Asia is China. So what I would recommend that you do is look at this region's map and make sure that you know at least like 1 or 2 countries in every region, that you can quickly identify that you know that Germany and France are in Western Europe, and that Ukraine and Romania are in Eastern Europe, for example. We know this. Good. All right. Well, just keep in mind, just make sure that you know that. All right, let's cut through the class. So we're going to go through every unit, and I'm going to show you some big picture things. I went through the entire course description that College Board publishes. This is like what they give out of like, this is what's going to be on the test. Obviously, it's going to be some combination of the following, right? Like, I don't know exactly what your FRQs are going to be or anything like that, but this is what you need to know in Unit 1. So I would recommend that you take notes, but the way that you should take notes is that you should write things down of words that you don't know. So if I go over something right now and you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what that means. If I had to answer something about that, I would not know what to say. You should start making a list of those things. And that's how you should spend your weekend, is making sure you know those things, So even if you wanted to create a little T-chart right now of like things I know, things I don't know, that would be super useful for you, because now you have kind of a roadmap for your weekend. Okay, so Unit 1 is kind of a small amount of the exam, but essentially it's just sort of the like intro of geography. Know that essentially it's all about how like how humans interact with the environment, interact with each other, and are sort of existing in this like space, right? That's what geography is. They tend to throw like couple multiple choice questions in about Unit 1. There are several like specific skills and tools that geographers use. For example, like several concepts here that I'm just kind of listing out. You know, some of these like key terms, I'm going to explain some of the more difficult ones, but a lot of these, you know, there are Quizlet decks that have all of them on it. So I'm not going to spend time going over every single term, but I am kind of listing them out for you for things that you should know, right? Knowing the difference between place and space, nature, society, these different aspects of understanding geography. The 5 themes of geography are important to remember. I don't know if they'll ask you specifically about them, but they help you to sort of group the different things. The way that you can remember them is Mr. Help. So movement, regions, humans interacting with the environment, location, place. Another set of themes that you can know are spice. This is a lot more used in like AP World, but it's really helpful in human geography if you just sort of know, like you can study any place in the world through any of these lenses. You can look at the society, right? The social aspect. You can understand their politics, their government, how people interact with the environment, the culture of the place, the economic systems of the place. So I'm going to bring up spice a couple times. This is what I'm talking about. So you call it ESPN. Perfect. Yeah. So there's different things that are used, different acronyms. You may even use like pirate, Sprite, grapes. There's a lot of them. So they're all pretty much the same, but this is sort of giving you that like lens. ESPN. What does ESPN stand for? Economic, social, political, environmental. What's the N? I'm not even sure what ESPN stands for, but I've heard of this one before. So I know that it's totally a thing. It's totally legit. Environmental, part of environmental. All right. Environment and nature, something like that. Okay, some other skills that come up in Unit 1. Understanding some of these like spatial patterns, right? Like how, you know, different like clusters versus like dispersed patterns of people. Being able to actually like use and interpret maps to identify spatial patterns. I don't think I put some of the maps here. So to kind of group up the maps, reference maps are like physical and political maps that just tell you basically where things are, right? So if I want to see where a country is in the world, I would use a reference map. Thematic maps are the ones that I wish I don't have the actual pictures here. Thematic maps are the ones that give you, you know, a lot of different information about a place. So choropleth, dot, proportional symbol. Proportional symbol is the one where like the symbol itself will change size based on how many people in that like the data in that region. So if there are like more people who love pizza instead of, I don't know, burgers, then the pizza might be bigger, something like that. So lost. Okay, so just think about Unit 1 as it's just like an intro unit. It's just kind of like setting it up. And some teachers even like do it later in the year because at the beginning it's so like abstract. It's just a bunch of tools. You know, it's just like, here are all the maps, here are all the like words that you're going to see throughout. And it is not very big on the test, which is why I'm not spending all that much time on it. You know, like you might get one question about these types of maps, like one multiple choice question. You won't get an FRQ on this stuff. The different projections, same thing. So the different projections, just remember that all of them are distorting something. They're all distorting either the shape or the area of you know, continents, or the distance between them, or the direction, right? Like if you look at some maps, it looks like if you just go straight west that you would end up in this place, but actually that wouldn't be true. So just remembering that they are all distorting, facts, they're distorting geography, then that's useful. And then, so this is a kind of annoying part of Unit 1, because then it just kind of throws in a bunch of stuff that are going to come up later, right? Using math, like within populations, you use math to do that. It's kind of dumb to like go over this. Like, this is not like this. This bullet point is just sort of like another list of tools that you would need that are going to come up later, right? And you can even see that like they are. I kind of show you how they're going to come up. So we will talk about each of these things. All right. So I'm kind of blowing through Unit 1 on purpose. The different regions. He's made good multiple choice questions too. And so basically you have, if there's a place in the world where there's one or more unifying characteristic, that could be a region, like the Corn Belt, like the South, right? Like the Midwest. You could also base a region off of patterns of activity, like the hinterland or the rimland. All right, so remember the 3 types of regions. Formal, this would be like specific states and cities. So tell me in the chat, what formal region are you in right now? What is the formal city where you are living? Perfect, right? So you've got California, Wisconsin, Colorado, Palm Beach. Perfect. So you could say the city, you could say the state. This is basically like where this is a defined region, right? There's a border around it. I'm streaming to you from Madison, Wisconsin. That's the region that I'm in right now. Looks like some of you guys are also in Wisconsin. Okay, what about functional? What would be a functional region that you are in right now? So you can think about like there's some sort of like node, there's something that brings people together, right? And there's a region connected to that thing. So it could be television, it could be like radio stations or like local stations. Yeah, like metro stops. Neighborhoods, newspaper routes, sports. So give me like your specific one. What is your functional region? So you're San Antonio Gazette, Manhattan. Yeah, man, these are good. Silicon Valley Silicon Valley would be more, I think, like vernacular because there isn't. I mean, yes, it could be. Los Angeles, a gas station, skiing resorts. Yeah, so I just moved to where I'm at, so I'm not really even sure. I mean, I guess I would be like, the big teams in this area would be like the Packers or, the Bucks. And so they play in Milwaukee or in Green Bay, and then there's a certain region around them that are fans of them. And then if at a certain point you're far enough away that you are a fan of a different sports team. Yeah, and then the last one would be vernacular. It's just like what we call it, but we're not really sure where it like starts and ends. So what's your vernacular region? So some of you guys that said like Bay Area, that's a good one. Because where do you draw the line of where Bay Area starts and where it ends? You can kind of have debates about that, right? So the South, the West Coast, exactly. It's perceptual. So there isn't like a boundary around it that says like this is the South and the South ends right here. Deep South, up north, right? I'm in the Midwest right now. But like where, you can kind of go back and forth between where those things start and end. Yonder. Good job. Okay, so regionalism is just about how you identify with the regions that you're in and how the scale of where you're looking at, like whether we're looking at things on like a city scale or a state scale or a country or a continent, like for those of you that are in Canada right now, we could consider ourselves in different regions, but if we zoom out far enough, we're in the same region. We're all in North America, it seems like. And so you know, that's kind of changes how you think about where you are. Let's see. Okay. All right. And then essentially, like, all of human geography is how these different places are connected, and how you have transfer of goods and services and people and information, money, disease, pollutants, good and bad things, right? That go between regions. This is the last piece. Okay, so the very last piece of this unit is around the actual technologies that geographers use, right? You have GIS versus GPS, and then just using data. So I'm going to kind of go through this a lot faster because I want to get to the next units. We've already spent too long on this. Don't spend too long worrying about unit 1. Don't spend too long on the different types of maps. You can go down huge rabbit holes with that. All right, spend much longer understanding the rest of the units. All right, population and migration. Let me give me in the chat 1 through 5. How do you feel about population and migration? 5 meaning like, man, any question on population and migration? I'm chilling. I'm going to be fine. 3s, 4s, 1.5. Okay. 3s. Okay. So we're like mostly good. But we just need a little bit to clean it up. So I'll point out some big picture stuff, and then hopefully by the time we go through it, you feel a lot better about this unit. So you can use like I have Spice here again, or ESPN. You can use any of those, but really this first key concept is just about understanding populations. Like, how do you actually look at them and understand them? And so you can look at how people are distributed at different scales. How many people, you can look at local versus global, and how many different people there are, and how packed in they are, how crowded it is, where they live. And there's reasons for this, right? There's physical factors like climate, land, water, of where on Earth do people actually live. They don't live in regions or in places that are too cold, too wet, too dry, too anything, right? If it's like an extreme, you can't really live there. People are more likely to live in places that, the weather is fairly like mild. And I say mild, like, even though I'm in Wisconsin right now, it's a lot better of a winter than if I were in Antarctica, And so why people live where they are, the different human factors as to how migrations have worked in the past. There's 3 methods for calculating population density. You may get one multiple choice question on one of these. So I'm going to put it back on you guys. So this is sort of quizzing you. Remind everyone, what is arithmetic population density? Let's see. Kaylee, I'll move your thing over. I can just post it as a question. So give me the differences between good. So the number of people in a geographic space, right? It's just the number of people per land. Okay, now what about physiological density? How does physiological density work? The amount of people divided by area of land. Good. You guys are in such a good spot. You guys are doing good. And what about agricultural population density? Amount of farmers per arable land. Right. So we're actually trying to see like how many people are there to farm this land. So some of the implications for these things, a lot of times, if you get a question, an FRQ question about anything having to do with population, chances are there is a part, C or D that's sort of like asking you why. You now have to like analyze that distribution of people. And so what are the implications of it? If there are a lot of people, if there aren't a lot of people, these are some of those answers. So you could consider social, political, economic implications. So for example, redistricting that may happen. If the population grows, redistricting happens so that the different, districts are sort of even. Medical services can be impacted. Maybe there aren't enough. Environmental implications would be like carrying capacity, right? How many people can this land support? And then just generally like trying to support them with housing, with different services. And so these are some of the impacts of increasing population. Okay, so population pyramids, which we'll look at in a second. These are what are used to project population growth and decline, and they'll show you age and sex of a population. So here we go on the population pyramids. And if you want a lot more review on population pyramids, I did a whole stream on these back in September. That replay is up in 5 Plus with those slides. I actually did a case study on each pyramid that just kind of helps to sort of sum it up. So you have, when you're looking at a population pyramid, you have male on the left, female on the right, and you're seeing how many of each age group there are, right? So it's basically like a bar graph on its side. So you can see like, you know, what it looks like in a country that has a really like steep pyramid. This is like rapidly expanding. This is sort of like your first stage of the DTM, which we'll also talk about. This is, you know, a really high birth rate and a you know, it's kind of a low life expectancy, right? They don't necessarily live that long. And why? It's because access to medicine, access to education. Those are really the two big reasons. Then as the country becomes more industrialized, there is more access to education and medicine. You still have a high birth rate, but people start living longer. And then as we progress even further, it starts to sort of, you know, slow down a bit in both of these, all the way down to this last one, where you have sort of like it's more contracting. And so it kind of goes back to back again. So where the birth rate itself then is less sometimes than how many people there are. So there's just like in Japan, there are more, there's just like more people that are older than there are younger. There's some schools that are just like empty because there aren't as many younger kids. Okay, so this question, could we mention female infanticide? I mean, I wouldn't, it depends on what the question is, right? So if you're looking at why, if you can see that there are less female babies than male babies, then you could infer, if it's a country that you know that like female infanticide happens, then you could infer that. You can infer a lot of other things too. You can look at like, okay, so here's Japan, right? And so people of Japanese descent, like why are there less 80 to 84-year-olds that are male rather than female? And especially like 85-year-olds, because of World War II. Where a lot of these men, this like gap right here, died in World War II. And so they didn't live to be 80. So you can infer a lot of different pieces about like what happened. Okay, so populations grow and decline over time. NIR is the natural increase rate. Doubling time is like how long it takes the population to double. And so there's different demographic factors for why those things happen. Your three big reasons are fertility, right? How many babies are being born, mortality, how many people are dying, and then migration, which the DTM does not take into account. But if there's a lot of migrants coming to a place, the population will increase. If there's a lot of migrants leaving, the population could decrease. So some of the theories of population growth, the DTM model, right? So this is demographic change over time that we'll show this chart in a second. There's a lot of questions in there. Malthus, right? So you have like population change and consequences, where Malthus basically says, I wonder if I actually have a whole slide on this. I just might. Let me go. Okay, so the DTM, let's just kind of talk through these and then we'll go back to the other pieces. So in the DTM, you have 4 stages, a 5th possible stage that we're not really quite sure about. There are no current countries in stage 1. This is like pre-modern, right? So you have a very high birth rate and death rate. And so the actual like total population is fairly stable and fairly low. Then as you start to industrialize, the death rate will go way down because of medicine. And then the population starts to increase because now you have this gap between birth rates and death rates, right? So because of that, now there's more people being born than there are dying. So the total population goes up. Into stage 3, the birth rate also starts falling. And so because of that, that's because of like education, like birth control and medicine. And so you have the birth rate falling, the death rate is still falling, and then eventually remaining kind of stagnant. But because this is still falling and this is dropping so much, now you have really fast population growth until you get into stage 4, where it's kind of back to that, you can just see like stage 4 is like almost like the opposite of stage 1. In stage 5, it starts to like decrease a little bit because the death rate will now be higher than the birth rate. What stage are MDCs and LDCs? So LDCs would definitely be in, those are your like least what's the word? Least whatever countries, least developed countries. Boo, my mind is going crazy just like yours, y'all. Thank you. Less developed countries, so it would be more like here, right? They're not necessarily industrialized yet. And so you have, the LDCs would be more of like 1 and 2. MDCs would be more 3, 4. What factors contribute to a country moving from stage 2 to 3 or 4? So a country is going to move from what determines movement through all of them is industry and access to technology. And so as long as if more people have access to education and there's more access to medicine, then birth rates and death rates will go down. Death rates go first because it's easier to just sort of like keep people alive longer. Decreasing the birth rate itself takes a lot more education and time. And so really that's what triggers both of them. Right. Sanitation, in these countries, you have people who are dying because of diseases like cholera or, malaria, diseases that are, they're associated with they're associated with poverty, with crowded areas because of bad sanitation. Whereas in more industrialized countries, you don't see those as much because there are preventative measures that can be taken, but you have to have money to do that and like education to do them. Whereas later, the people in this is like the epidemiological transition. So people in stage 4 and stage 5 tend to die more often from things like Alzheimer's or heart disease, right? More of the diseases that like are associated with like living a long life, right? So if you live in a stage 1 or stage 2 country, you're not even going to live long enough to have to deal with those diseases. You instead are more likely to get some sort of infectious disease before then. Should you know how to calculate crude birth rate and death rates? Nah, you don't need to know that. Okay, I want to show. All right, so there's a whole big chart in here that just kind of shows even more specific, like, what the birth rate is, what the reasons for it are. So if you want more on this, you've got the slides and some examples from each one, where you can kind of, so if you get a question about the DTM, you're going to have to give example more than likely. So just know at least one country in each stage. Malthus, let's talk about Malthus really quick. So I think this is so fascinating. So with Malthus, you have basically this cycle that he, proposed that says that this is how all like civilizations go. you have a time of prosperity, right? Where like this is like kind of a golden age. There's lots of things being created, lots of money, lots of resources. That will inevitably lead to some sort of crisis, right? Where there's, power struggles, or maybe this one civilization is so prosperous that now others are going to attack them. And that will inevitably lead to a collapse of that society, where now, then you sort of have this period of nothing. I mean, people are still there, but there's no empire that's ruling them. And then there's going to be some like flash of innovation, some charismatic leader, something that happens that brings people back together, and then they rebuild, and then they're prosperous, and you just kind of keep going. And so he's looking at all of history, and he's like, well, the Romans did that, the Han dynasty does that, all of every empire sort of does that. And so this is his theory, except that it's wrong because he doesn't think about the fact. So in his mind, you have this issue where the population is going to increase faster than food, right? Where you don't have enough, you won't have enough food that will be created. And so this crisis that happens here is it's inevitable. It has to happen because otherwise you would have too many people and not enough food. And so he's kind of saying like, this is the way that empires work, and it's for the best because it keeps the population down. So you need this war, you need this natural disaster, you need these things to happen so that there are enough people, there's enough food for everybody. But it's wrong. This is Malthus. He's wrong because he doesn't anticipate technology advancing the way that it does, right? So he's living in this time in the 1700s, in the early 1700s. So he can't predict the Industrial Revolution. He has no idea that's going to happen. And because that happens, our food production goes up a ton, right? So even though the population is going to increase very fast, the way that we are able to produce food has also increased. And so we don't need this here, right? Like we may still have crises, but it's not going to be about food. At least it shouldn't be. We have enough food to provide for everybody. Okay, moving back to... All right, so we went through the DTM, we went through Malthus, we went through epidemiological transition of like why people die in different regions of different ways. Population policies. So countries either want to promote population growth or they want to restrict population. So pro-natalist versus anti-natalist. So like the one-child policy in China. Reasons for changes in fertility. It always comes back to education. So like, why do people have more children? Education would do it. Reasons for why people die, access to medication, and the impact of that is like retirement voting. All right, so talking about migrations, trying to pick up the pace a little here so we can get through everything. So migrations, you have push factors, reasons to leave, and you have pull factors, reasons to go, or where you're going to go, right? And so push factors tend to be negative. Why am I going to leave here? Maybe I don't have a job. Maybe there's a war. A hurricane just happened, so my house is gone. I don't have what I need here. So now where do I decide to go? Do I want to go to the city next door? Do I want to go to the country next door? Do I want to go to a country across the world? Something will help me decide. It's some kind of opportunity or peaceful setting, or why do you pick one over the other? So there's two types of migrations. There's forced, meaning you didn't have a choice, you had to go. So a forced migration could be like refugees, internally displaced peoples, asylum seekers, but they're not choosing really to migrate. They have to migrate. They cannot stay where they are. Whereas Voluntary would be like, I don't want to live in this place anymore. Maybe I lost my job, or I don't see a future where I am, but I don't have to go, and my life is not at stake if I don't go. And so all these are the different types of migrations. Some of the other forced migrations are like slavery. I'm literally forced to go to this place. Someone is taking me. Different immigration patterns to the U.S. Worth knowing those things. I kind of wish I just had like a bunch of pictures on there. I'll do another stream later this weekend. So, consequences for migration. Consequences can always mean something good or something bad. You can have positive consequences, like spread of language, innovation. Because people migrate, they bring ideas with them. They bring religion with them. They bring language. They can send money back to where they live. They can send money back to their family. And some of the like negative consequences for migration are that every time there's more migrants that more migrations are happening, you have an increase in xenophobia, in like anti-immigrant policies. There's always this like backlash. So the Chinese Exclusion Act, the National Origins Act. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so that is Unit 2. Let me just check the questions real quick. All right, so I see most of these are about culture. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see if there's any other. What are some examples for each type of population pyramid, and also the different stages in the DTM model? Okay, so we kind of went through that just to like bring this up really quick. This one. So some examples. So in stage 1, there are no countries. You might have some like remote tribes. Stage 2 would be like Egypt, Kenya, India. Stage 3, Brazil. Stage 4, the US, Japan. Japan could also be considered. Moving into stage 5, Germany. All right, so these are your kind of examples here. This here, what exactly is thinking spatially? Thinking spatially is all about thinking about like space, like not like outer space, like the space that we live in. Like I live in this area, and like how I connect with other people is dependent on what our society looks like, right? Why this building looks like it does. The architecture has to do with the culture of this region. And so it's really thinking about, it's almost like thinking as if you're inside of like a Google map, Okay, so in terms of like being able to remember the DTM quickly, just think about it just as a transition between all the way from, remote tribes to incredibly industrialized societies that are churning out tons of production, and there's lots of people there. And so it's just sort of those are the differences, right? So high birth rates, high death rates, all the way to low birth rates, low death rates. Okay, let's move forward. Culture. Yeah. All right, so culture, shared practices, culture means a lot of things. It's all about the different ideas that we share, right? The technologies, the attitudes, the traits. The traits of culture look like the food that we eat, what architecture looks like, how we use land. Those are related to our cultural traits. The fact that we have, this is Unit 3 now. The fact that we have a very globalized society has really sped up cultural exchanges. And so, rather than it taking a long time for culture to spread, it happens very fast now. things get tweeted out fast. Things get connected very quickly. It doesn't take months or weeks or even a day for something to spread. And then, of course, culture is different everywhere, right? You have regional cultures, language. Think about like, I'm like just like out of words. Religion can be different in different places. Ethnicity, accents, right? So you can sound different. You might be speaking the same language. All of us are speaking English, but we may speak it a little bit differently. We may have words that we say words that I say that you don't say, or vice versa. Right? These are part of our culture or regional culture. The ethnicity and gender are also reflected in cultural attitudes based on how women are treated, how different ethnicities are treated, different like ethnic enclaves, right? You're like Chinatown, Koreatown, Little Italy. All right. You can figure out where in the world you are just by looking at the landscape. You can figure it out because there's this language written on the sign, or I see architecture that is very, has Islamic features. Maybe I can tell there's actually a sacred site. There's a church. Right? I can tell a lot about where I am just based on what the landscape looks like. All right. How does culture spread? This is just kind of all types of culture. That we're not talking about popular and folk yet. How does culture spread? It can be contagious. So give me an example in the chat of something that spreads in a contagious sense. Right? This is more of like viral. Yeah, a disease could be that. What else? What is something else that has spread? Silly bands. People still use silly bands? Blue jeans. Yeah, internet trend. Things that you see on the internet, right? Like that are just kind of happening and it's spreading very fast, like memes, right? Memes are spreading like contagious. What about hierarchical? What is something that spreads in a hierarchical fashion? This is like from a place of power. Yeah, like different fashion trends that maybe you see like a famous person wearing, and that is then kind of spreading to everyone else. Yeah, the MAGA hat would definitely be a hierarchical diffusion. It's coming from a person with power, spreading to everybody else. Kim K's makeup, for sure. What about stimulus? Stimulus-based diffusion. This is things that are like sparking a new idea. So it could be, yeah, there you go. The veggie burger at McDonald's in India. McDonald's in India is sort of like a relocation or a hierarchical, but the fact that they are now, they're using like their own culture to adapt it, right? Or like using, yeah, right, samosas in it. And so it's still McDonald's, but it has a twist, right? There's a new type of food at this place it's not really McDonald's food, but it's not really like traditional Indian food. It's sort of this new thing. So stimulus is just like, it's just something else creates a new idea. And then it sort of like branches off from that. And then relocation would just be people literally moving with the idea. So even like the Industrial Revolution was relocated. People literally moved from England to the US with factory plans. Now I'm going to build one here. Reindeer herding in Siberia. I don't know much about them. Okay, so the word hearth means the origin of an idea. This is literally where things start, right? So the hearth of Islam would be in the Middle East, right, in Saudi Arabia. All right, so getting into some of the other pieces here. So one of these questions was, Would folk culture be considered relocation diffusion? Yes, because it wouldn't travel in a viral sense. It would travel because people are moving around with it. Somebody went to and experienced some sort of folk culture and brought it back to another group. All right. Lingua franca is language used for business. So English, using English in India or in different countries in Africa would be a really good example of this, because it's not necessarily the traditional language. It may not even be the most common language spoken, but people speak a lot of different languages. So let's use English, and it will be the language we share, right? It's sort of that shared language. Okay, so other things that can affect, let me see here. Other things that can affect the spread of language is like colonialism, imperialism, historical factors of movements of people, trade. These shape the actual the actual like how things move. Right. So one of these questions around pidgin language and lingua franca. Lingua franca is like a full language that is used to make things easier. We may all speak different languages, but we're going to conduct this meeting in English so that we can all understand it. Pidgin language is more about like developing sort of like a new version of it, right? And so it's sort of it's when like sort of like Spanglish, right? It's sort of like a combined version of two things they're drawn from different languages. Creole is not an example of that. So Creole is its own language. Maybe it started that way, but it is no longer like a pidgin language. Right. So like at this point, like people acquire this when like Spanglish is the best example. So if you speak English and you might know a few words in Spanish, and you're talking to someone that speaks Spanish, then you may kind of develop a way of talking to each other, even though you don't speak each other's language. But if you speak English or let's say you speak French and you're talking to someone that only speaks Spanish, but you both know English, you're using a lingua franca, right? It's a language you have in common. And Creole is its own language. It's its own thing. All right. So if you look at a map and you look at where people are in the world and what languages they speak, you can trace that back to things like colonialism, imperialism, trade, right? They speak Portuguese in Angola in Africa because Portugal had that colony. They speak French in Algeria. Many people speak Spanish in the Philippines. Like it all relates back to where people were colonized. Even the fact that we speak English. Why do we speak English? Because the British had control of this region. The difference between acculturation and assimilation and multiculturalism. Put it in the chat. What's the difference between acculturation and assimilation? Maybe give me an example. And then multiculturalism is when you are practicing more than one culture. Right. So acculturation is adapting to something. Assimilation is becoming part of it. You guys are killing it right now. You're really in a good spot, I would say. Can I go over language hearth? So the word hearth just means where it's from. So language hearth would be where did that begin? Where did that language start? Good. Right. So you guys got this. Assimilation, you end up losing. You lose your traditional culture. Acculturation is more mixing of the cultures. Okay, so some of the different religions, you basically have two groups. You have ethnic religions like Hinduism and Judaism. These specifically spread through relocation. And these two religions don't have like missionaries. It's hard to convert to one of these two religions because it is really spread through like generations and where people move to. All right, so if you're freaking out right now and you're like, there's a lot going on, just go through these slides, go through the slides and just kind of make sure that these terms, that you know these terms. So what was this other question here? Can you differentiate between syncretism and acculturation? It's a fine line. So syncretism is blending. Right. Like, so an example of a syncretic religion would be what's it called? Sikhism is a kind of a mixture of Islam and Hinduism, right? So you have these two religions that are blended together, and you can sort of see the difference, right? And so acculturation, I think, maybe just happens on a smaller scale, more of like one person might do it. And yes, you can, definitely focus on the terms, and yes, you can see these slides anytime. The other types of religions are universalizing. These are ones that expand through like people relocating, but also through like hierarchical. It could span through contagious. It can spread. It spreads a lot faster because you have sort of part of like a mission of these religions is to spread the religion. So Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. All right. Differences between folk culture and pop culture. Folk culture is traditional. It's more isolated. It's typically found in rural areas, indigenous peoples, right? So it's not something that's spreading very fast. It's something that's very unique to a small set of people. Pop culture is something that is adapted to anybody, right? You find it more in urban areas. It can adapt to different people. It moves very fast. It's influenced by the media. All right. Moving into Unit 4. Maybe we are doing okay. Unit 3, you can go way down a hole in Unit 3 because there's so much to know about each religion. But, stick to the big ideas here and you'll be okay. And stick to the terms. So if someone wants to drop a good Quizlet deck in the chat, I can share that on Twitter too. Yes, if you're good with the terms, you'll be okay. I think you can get at least a 3 if you're good with the terms. All right, so politics. It's worth knowing the different types of political entities. Nice. These are good. All human geography terms. I'm going to open that up for later. Yeah, it's definitely a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of words in there that you don't, really need to know. But just start playing it. Just keep playing the games on Quizlet. Okay, so the different types of political entities, excuse me, these can get confusing because they all have the same words in them. Okay, so let's kind of go through them. You have nations, which would be, give me examples. Give me an example of a nation. The U.S. Yeah. Now give me, right. So, yeah. So let's go through nations and states. These are like kind of similar. Nation states would be something like France that is that is, so like another example of a nation could just be like the like Iroquois nation, where like it's not necessarily related to an actual country, but this is a group of people who identify within it the same thing. Then you have a state, which is like the US, right? Where you have an actual country. A nation state is a state that's made up of one group of peoples, right? So, for example, France, right? So France is made up of French people, right? Whereas it gets more confusing in multicultural places like the United States or Canada or the multicultural ones. And a stateless nation is a nation, so a group of people that don't have their own state. Like the Kurds. Like Palestinians, yes. Yes, right? So Palestinian Arabs would be a nation. They are also a stateless nation, right? So not all nations are stateless. Not all states are nation states. This is totally easy, right? It's easy to memorize all this. It all sounds exactly the same. Multinational states are more like the US, where you have many groups of people that live in a state. A multi-state would have been like the Soviet Union, where you have several states within one country. What's the difference between a stateless nation and a nationless state? Well, it's just like, okay, so you have a stateless nation would be like the Kurds, who are a group of people that don't have their own country. A nationless state would be like the US or Canada, where we're not all part of the same nation, right? So we don't all have the exact same culture or background or ethnicity, right? We have differences between us, but we're part of the same country. So this is where it gets confusing, to say the least. The word sovereignty, yeah, just means having like independence. A satellite state it's almost like a colony. It's like a state that you control that is not necessarily within your state. You see what I mean about like going through Quizlet decks on these is the best thing to do, or just knowing examples. So let's run through them again. An example of a nation would be the Iroquois. An example of a state would be Canada. An example of a nation state would be France. Stateless nation would be the Kurds. Multinational states would be the United States. Multi-state would be Soviet Union. A buffer state is between two. It's between a region that has conflict. So it's sort of in between conflicts. So like Ukraine, where you have conflict between, like Poland, between Western Europe and between Russia, and it's sort of in between. Okay. So quick evolution. The nation state itself starts in Europe, and then colonialism and imperialism lead to the spread of actual like nationalism. Probably going to get you confused by going through too much of this like history, but basically you have all of these things kind of change throughout because of historical factors. Okay, so some of the theories to remember in terms of like political theories, who has the most power, it's dependent on who has the land. And so there's different theories about which land is most important. Is it the heartland? Is it that in between of like Afro-Eurasia, right? That like, Central Asia, that region. If you control that, do you then control the world? Do you have the most power? Or is it more of the rimland, the outskirts of that? And so these are just different theories about that. Moving forward. So this is the heartland and the rimland, right? So here's the heartland. The theory is that if you control this region, you have the most power, versus the rimland. If you control this region, then you'd have the most power. Okay, so talking about boundaries, where devolution will come up. International boundaries lead to like limits on sovereignty, right? So like where there are boundaries means that there are, you know, you may not necessarily be independent. May not have independence of your country because there is someone else is ruling you. Law of the sea is just that there's space around the coasts that are still belonging to that country, that you can't just be right in the water and then be in like international waters. You'd have to go further out. Boundaries also, we also talk about boundaries when we talk about voting districts, redistricting, gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is when you are redistricting to basically like support one group over another. And so, for example, if there is a large population of Black voters that would be a large voting block in this district, what you see in terms of like voter suppression, a type of voter suppression, is that you basically split that block into two districts, where instead of being a majority like Black voting district, you now have two majority white voting districts, and the Black population is split. And so we see this in terms of there's some pretty bad gerrymandering in a lot of regions. In pretty much every state, there's like bad gerrymandering. Boundaries themselves do not always coincide with language, religion, ethnicity, nationality, economy. Like, if you look at especially like boundaries in Africa, for example, where states are drawn, sometimes has nothing to do with anything about those people. You could have two groups of people that speak the same language, that are very historically similar, but now there is a boundary in between them that is dividing those two groups of people, and it's not. They should be in the same country. Okay, forms of government. You guys asked about this. Unitary and federal. Unitary is very centralized. So something like France, right? Or like, I think Germany, right? Where you have, maybe not Germany, but in France, you don't necessarily have smaller states. You sort of have like one centralized government. A federal government is more about, there are powers within the states and within local governments, but then there's a federal government that's above that, right? So the federal government has control over the state governments, but the state governments also have autonomy as well. They can do their own things. And so this is how we sort of split up the power. State shapes can come up sometimes, where it's just the different actual like physical shapes of states. Most of the reasons why the different shapes are like this have to do with just like physical geography, right? Like Thailand is prorupted. You have the state, and then you have sort of like a longer side of it that comes out of it. It's literally like proruption. And so and fragmented Indonesia is like, because it's a lot of islands. So some of these things are because of physical geography. A longer state like Chile is not necessarily because of physical geography. It's a little bit. There are like mountains that's kind of block it in, but it could be the boundary could be someplace else, right? Perforated means like in South Africa, there are other countries within it, like Swaziland, like Lesotho. And so the reason why there's a perforated state in South Africa just has to do with just straight up like people created a state there. Okay. Moving forward. All right. Supranationalism are organizations that control more than one place. That include more than one place. So like the UN, like NATO, like the EU, trade agreements, political agreements. Devolution is when a state is fragmented into smaller It can be a bunch of things. So it's either the like actual fragmentation of states into independent regions. It can be like subnational political units, or like the former Yugoslavia breaking down into smaller states, like the Caucasus, right? Where like Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, like those countries there. Albania, not Albania. I'm like quizzing myself on maps. Okay. What drives people apart? You can have physical geography driving people apart, actual ethnicities like separating. Terrorism could drive people apart. Irredentism is when you bring a country back into sort of where it was originally, or bring a region back. So what Russia did when they annexed Crimea in 2014 is an example of irredentism, because it's Crimea is, they mostly speak Russian there, and so it used to be a part of Russia, and so by bringing it back, that's why you had that. It's why they did it. Centrifugal forces, where are things that pull people apart. So this is like, majority minority relations. It could be about race, class, ethnicity, uneven development, ethnic movements, things that pull people apart. Centripetal forces are things that bring people together. So identity, good infrastructure, cultural similarities. So, whereas for example, a centrifugal force that brings people apart could be like in India, the differences in religion of, Muslim and Hindu. There's been like historical tensions between them. And that is something that drives people apart. It keeps people sort of at odds with each other. Whereas a centripetal force that keeps them together could be something more around like national identity, right? Like you can both be Indian even though you're different religions. Woo! Centrifugal anti-nationalism, centripetal pro-nationalism. Yeah. So splitting up the island of Cyprus, example of devolution. So irredentism is when you're bringing a region back into where it kind of used to be, where it's going back into its original place. Okay, you guys are doing a really good job answering each other's questions. You can help me out too in the chat box, not just in the chat box, in the question box. You can answer each other's questions in there too, just by commenting. All right, so we're pushing forward. Unit 5, agriculture, food, rural land use. So again, this word hearth coming up again. The hearth of agriculture itself is the Fertile Crescent. It also appeared in Southeast Asia and the Americas. It sort of appeared in a lot of different places at different times, but it was, think of like the Fertile Crescent as modern day Iraq. Then it's diffused outward, right? So it diffuses because of trade and relocation and migrations. The Columbian Exchange is the biggest diffusion of agrarian practices that has ever happened. And so now you have the two world zones connecting. The Americas and Afro-Eurasia are now connected. And so now you have a globalization of plants and animals. The actual the trade of new crops, of diseases, of new ideas, so much more is interconnected. So in terms of agriculture, people change the landscape. And so the way that people have affected the landscape is through terrace farming, through irrigation practices, deforestation. Any of these practices are for agrarian means. You are trying to make it easier to create food. But in doing that, you could be harming the environment because you're changing the natural environment. New technology. So this is always this pattern. New technology will always increase food production, or at least at this time. Because there's more food, there's more people. When there's more people, there's more workers, more production. This is sort of the cycle, right? This is the thing that Malthus didn't see coming, that we would have enough technology to really increase food, and that increased food would be able to not only sustain more people, but actually increase the population even more, which then provided more workers to create more food, and so on. Awesome. Green Revolution is the process of happened in the 40s, started in India, about essentially creating more food production and harming the environment less by doing so. And so some of the consequences of it, begins with, it's basically creating higher yield crops, increasing the use of chemicals and mechanical farming to do that. It's good because it led to more food production and it lowered global hunger, right? So we created a whole lot more food, but it was bad because we also damaged the environment because of using chemicals, because the technology we used was high, using the different types of seeds was not necessarily good. All right. So just a little bit about climate. Obviously, climate affects what food exists. So these are bioclimatic zones. Mediterranean, shifting agriculture, pastoral nomadism are all related to the different actual climates. All right, the difference in terms of different types of agriculture, you have, should be C. Subsistence agriculture is literally what you're farming to feed yourself. So you have, a small farm, you're using that food to sustain your own life. Commercial would mean that you're selling it. So you're using a much bigger farm and you're producing a ton of food so that you can sell it. The difference, okay, so Mediterranean agriculture is agriculture that appears in Mediterranean regions. So the Mediterranean is a region in Europe, but that climate appears in other places as well. Like the Bay Area is very similar. And so, you have a lot of wine production in the Bay Area, just like you have wine production in Greece. And so those are those are Mediterranean regions. Okay, intensive farming practices are market gardening, plantations, mixed crops and livestock. It's very intense on the land. It can harm the land because you're using it often. You're not really giving it time to grow back. You're just constantly putting pressure on it. Extensive farming practices is more about space. So intensive, you're using the same place over and over again, and you're just sort of re-upping that piece of land. Extensive is more of you're using a larger amount of land. So nomadic herding, you're moving around faster so that you can use different things. So negatives, so you can have, these things can be combined. So you can have subsistence. Well, subsistence tends to fit with intensive because you're using the same plot of land year after year. Commercial can also be intensive or extensive. Depends on where you're going, but it tends to be more intensive. Let's see. Okay. All right. So large scale agriculture, agribusiness, This is like, you're sort of, so the difference between horizontal and vertical integration has to do with, like, in a vertical agricultural industry, it's every step of the process. So from planting the seeds to harvesting them to creating something with them, right? Like you're making wine, right? So let's say you need to grow the grapes, you need to harvest the grapes, you need to now produce the wine, you need to manufacture the bottles that are gonna be the wine will be in. You're gonna then market and advertise it and actually sell it and ship it off to the correct people. This is vertical, right? So every step of the way, whereas horizontal is just about one step. And so basically just across the world, commercial operations have been replacing family operations. There was a whole FRQ on this a couple years ago, this like LDC production, this low latitude. Low latitude just means close to the equator, where things like coffee and bananas are often grown most in the world, consumed globally. And it's literally like anywhere that kind of falls within that region close to the equator is where those things are grown. What would plantation agriculture be considered? It's like sugar, tobacco, cotton, any of those things are grown usually on like plantations, huge plantations. And we mostly connect it to like there's a whole history of like plantation economy around slaves. What would we consider? I would say intensive and commercial. Plantation still in Africa for sure. What is ranching? Monoculture. Monoculture is when you use like the same type of seed for every crop. So the problem with monoculture is like the like Irish potato famine happened because of monoculture. And so they had one type of potato, and those years, the potato that was getting infected by a certain disease that was spreading across the potato crops. And so they lost a lot of their harvest because it was all the same potato that they were growing. And so if you diversify your crops, you're less likely to lose the whole thing. All right. Settlement patterns around like how people are distributed in rural lands, clustered around some type of node, something pulled them to that, versus dispersed or spread out. Linear would be more of like on a line. So you could be linear in terms of like, if you look at like the Nile, where people live is very, very close to the water. It's more linear because of the water. Whereas in like Iowa, people are fairly dispersed with the exception of cities, right? Around like Des Moines, you have a lot more people around that node. All right, let's talk about von Thunen. I'm not even like answering these questions. So much stuff to talk about. I'm trying to see if there's here we go. Von Thunen. So this is the sort of bullseye of like how land is used. You have a city in the middle. You would then right close to the city have intensive farming and like dairy, like crops like fruits and vegetables, things that can go bad because now they're nice and close to the city, so you can grow them and then sell them in the city. The next one would be a forest, right? So it's still like kind of close, but it's sort of like protection almost. The next one would be extensive field crops. So, larger things that you can grow that's more of like wheat or corn. It's not going to go bad as fast. Rice, but you need a lot of land for it, so it can be further out from the city. And then finally, you would put animals like livestock. You want them away from the city because they have disease. They also can walk, so you can bring them to the city if you need to. Okay, so all right. So some of the issues in agriculture are around like some of the the things that are changing, right? So you have new innovations in agriculture, like aquaculture, right? Like the use of like agriculture within water, organic farming, GMOs versus non-GMOs, biotech, lots of stuff within this that can all have impacts on the food and the environment. Whether or not the agriculture itself is sustainable, so like how much is it degrading the soil? What is it doing to biodiversity in the region? Are you overusing the land? Affecting the water? Like sustainability is a big piece of this, of whether or not you can really continue to sustain the population. The pattern of food production is influenced by choice. And so, kind of what are the trends, right? What are the local food movements that happen? That's what people are going to buy. So that's what's going to affect the pattern of that production. More of it gets produced. Factors about location. So economies of scale mean that you can sort of, it's like a agglomeration. You can use the resources that another business may be using, and then you can kind of work together to reach more people with less money. Government policies also affect the production of agriculture, of how much can be produced, where it can be produced, where it can be sold, how much can be sold, all types of different policies. All right, talked about Thunen. All right, let me take a few minutes and check out some questions. Come back to this. Let's see. Oh man, who's tired? How tired are you? You guys are here on a Friday night. I'm honestly so proud of you. On a scale of 1 to 5, five being the tiredest you've ever been in your entire life, where are you at? 10. It's not bad. We're getting through it though. We're like pushing through. I love like this kind of review period because it's just like we're all kind of doing it together. Took a 3-hour nap as soon as you got home. Ugh, jealous. A lot of questions here. Okay. 6.65. Can you please go over the differences between the first agricultural revolution, the second, and the third? So the first would be like the actual rise of agriculture when it began, like 10,000 years ago. The second would be like the Industrial Revolution. So now we have, like tractors and factories. We can produce a lot more. We have better energy systems. The third would be like the Green Revolution. And so getting even further. I know. I'm really proud of you guys, though. "24 3-hour energies." You're never going to sleep again. All right. Unit 6. We can cut through this one kind of quickly, and then Unit 7. All right. So industrialization begins in England. Why? Because they have the right resources, the right people, the perfect amount of time, the right the right government policies that allowed for industrialization. Then the diffusion of industrialization increased populations around the world, increased food supplies, and really like triggered migrations to cities. So it was a massively important event in history and in the study of geography. Because there's an increase in industrialization, now more people need raw materials, and you're producing more stuff, so you need more markets to actually sell it to, which leads to imperialism. This is like a really quick, like, industrialization starts, increases the population, the number of workers, then you need more stuff. Now that I can create things faster, give me more to create with and give me more people to sell it to. And so then you have imperialism. And so imperialism is where let's see. Imperialism is where one country would like go and take some sort of control over another country. It could be like a colonial control, like a political power. It could be economic. It could be cultural. But you're taking advantage of other places for the purpose of taking things from them and being able to sell to them. Okay. All right, the different economic sectors. So it pretty much goes in order of like how like things are produced, right? So you have primary sectors would be like raw materials. This is like farmers, right? Then those materials go to the secondary sectors, which are like manufacturers. So if we think about wine, okay, so raw materials, the grapes itself, the production of grapes would be primary. Then manufacturing the wine itself would be secondary. Then you have the actual services that are selling the wine. That would be tertiary. Then beyond that, you have like legal and finance that are sort of part of the business production of it. Those would be quaternary. And then you have quinary, which is even higher up, research, management, education. That's where those would be. Yeah. Okay, Weber's least cost theories. It's basically that if you can minimize your transportation and labor costs, then you can make more money, right? And the way to do that is by maximizing like the economies of scale, the agglomeration. So if I need to, back to the wine idea. So if I want to create, a wine industry, it's in my best interest to create one right next door to another one. And then we can sort of both be sharing the costs of labor, of, transportation. We don't have to spend as much. It also depends on like where you want to set up shop. Like I don't want to put my factory too far away from where the people are because they need to get there and I'd have to pay them more if we're further away. But if we can be close together, we can produce more. Okay. Teaching is not tertiary. Teaching is more, it kind of depends. Technically, education is more of the like, I think it's even like quinary. Maybe teaching is tertiary. There's like some education that is higher up. Maybe it's more of just like colleges and universities that would be higher up. Yeah, Rishi, I'm with you. I'm overpowered. Y'all are just like so ready for this test. You're more ready than I am. All right. Some of the measures of development, you've got GNI per capita. You could look at like the different structures of these economic sectors, where income distribution happens, fertility rates, infant mortality, how much access to healthcare and literacy rates. You can study, you can see how developed a society is based on any of these factors. You can also measure gender inequality, like reproductive health, female empowerment, labor to market participation. So there's a lot of ways to actually like measure how developed a society is and to understand why. The HDI is the Human Development Index. It actually measures all of these things. So just to like bring up Weber's least cost theory again, because this is worth it. And so essentially there's like three things that determine all about like manufacturing establishments, like where they should be. One is the cost of labor. Two is the cost of transportation. And three is agglomeration, how close and clustered you can be to other industries doing the same thing. So, if you want to open up a hot dog stand on a beach and there's another hot dog stand, if I open shop right next to them, I don't have to work as hard to market because anyone that finds one hot dog stand found them both. I just have to show people why choose my hot dog versus the other one. Sounds so funny. Okay. Rostow's stages of economic growth. These are just like the linear stages to mass production. These are the ones that are like, what is like takeoff, where you have you just have physical stages to get up to mass production. Wallerstein's world systems. I think I have a bunch of hang on. Why didn't I put these in order? Okay, so basically the stages of the economic growth, you have this like traditional society that hasn't really begun the process yet, and then like elite group of people start to do it. It takes off really fast, then it becomes more and more mature until finally you have mass production. So it's just like physical steps to get up. Wallerstein's is like the worst. Wallerstein's is all about the like core, semi-periphery, and periphery. And so the core countries are like the MDCs, right? So United States, China, Germany, Great Britain. And then you have that where like most of the economic production is happening. Then you have semi-periphery, where it's like newly industrialized countries. It's pretty good standards of living, but they also have really extreme gaps between rich and poor. So like Chile, Brazil, India. I guess China would be like, honestly, I think China kind of goes in. It depends. Like it's definitely a strong economy and has huge economic productivity, but there is a lot of people there, and so there's huge gaps. Periphery would be more on the outskirts. Most of includes most of Africa, parts of South America, and Asia. These are sort of your third world countries. Wouldn't China be semi-periphery? Yeah, I mean, it's just like such a big economy that's just like it's got a bigger economy than half the core countries. So I don't, it's kind of I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say either. Okay, so basically the core countries have become dominant because of all right, you win. Yeah, I mean, so because China's GDP per capita is lower because the population is so big, right? So it is still like one of the most important economies in the world, though. And then you have this is a little bit about women in the workforce, the role of women in economic development, use of microloans, where basically like a woman could get, like women in Indonesia and India in China could get a microloan for like $250 that go really far, and they can set up a local business and then grow that business, right? And then eventually they'll pay that back. But it's very, very small loans that are developing huge, like good businesses in smaller economies. Let's see. Okay, so this is just about development across space and time. So just the fact that you have trade that is developing across time, that is creating interdependence, and that's good and bad, right? You have like international trade because of that interdependence, and so we can produce more, we can trade more, but it also means that we're tied to each other. So when there is like a financial crisis in the world, everybody's affected now. Nobody's immune to it. And it changes like imbalances of consumption. It's shifting like where like most manufacturing jobs are now moving to sort of those like semi-periphery countries. And then the core countries are more about the like services. Okay, this is like a continuation of that. Outsourcing, right? So decline in manufacturing jobs in core countries, moving those to periphery or semi-periphery countries. diffusion of industry outside of the core countries. So maquiladoras, the EPZ, free trade is kind of moving where industry happens based on like some of these, based on like government policies and cost of labor. So it's just like, you know, it's cheaper to have labor in Mexico. And so we create these systems where that becomes easier to do. Emergence of service sectors, so really high-tech industry growth poles like Silicon Valley, where you have now very, very like high-tech services. So, you know, it's not necessarily even just, you know, creating wine. It's just now like creating an app to make it easier to pick which wine you need. Okay, so issues around sustainability. We are harming our environment. We're using a lot of stuff. And so that is leading to, you know, limiting resources. It's affecting the environment through pollution and climate change, issues around human health. This will get worse and worse. Okay, so ecotourism is a strategy to like protect the environment through low impact tourism. So just like promoting travel, but doing it through things that are like still sustainable. All right, we're cutting to the last unit and I'm going to keep going because I do want to get through this. And I know a lot of you guys had questions about this one. So basically cities, there are different factors that drive people either to a city or to a suburb that like initiate that. So for example, the actual like site and situation of cities and the growth of them, the access to transportation and communication, people, as soon as people were more likely to get to, you know, as soon as like trains expanded, people moved to cities faster. We can get there faster. And we can communicate. I didn't even know what the city was like until communication got better. And then I heard about it and now I want to go. Improvements in agriculture and transportation. So like, these are all factors that are initiating urbanization, right? So, you know, because we have more food, we have more technology, we have more people, there's more movement happening, more government policies to promote that movement. So even like, you know, policies that might encourage you to move to a city to start a business or to go to a school. Okay, world cities are cities like New York, London, Tokyo, that are really at the top of the urban hierarchy. This is where most of like just so much industry happens there. And so this drives globalization because they're very much like connected. Mega cities are the like massive metropolises that have sort of their own like whole ecosystem of like class societies. Okay, so a couple of models to help understand this. Rank size rule means that the like sixth largest city is 1/6 of the size of the largest city. So there's just like a linear decrease in size. This is where so it just kind of like goes in order like that. So you can figure out how big it is based on that. This question around globalization, globalization is just like making the world smaller. So we are globalized in our economy because we're trading with everyone. We have, you know, people working in different countries for different, like you can outsource things. You can do like freelance work for anybody online. And so it's very globalized, even like culture, like on a Sunday night right now, everyone in the world is watching Game of Thrones. It's globalized, right? So we're all experiencing something together, whereas that never happened before a couple hundred years ago. Whoops. Okay, so the law of primate cities is, hold up. Law of primate cities is that The largest city is at least twice the size of the next largest city. So this is not really the case in anywhere in the US. But for example, Paris is at least twice the size of the next largest city in France. You think about just like the huge cities in places where there's really like one big city. The central place theory helps to explain the number, size, and location of human settlements in an urban system. And I have let me cut through, oh my God. Okay, let me just go back. Yeah, think of a country where you can only think of one city. That's the best way to remember the primate cities. If you can only think of one city in that country, it's probably a primate city. Probably, but maybe not necessarily. Gravity model just estimates the amount of interaction between two cities. So like the further you are, the more likely you are to interact with the next closest city. All right, so cutting through some of the models of cities. Again, you guys, I have replays on all of this. Every single slide I'm covering, there's like a full replay for it inside of 5able Plus. So in North America, you tend to have these like concentric, right, like models that are either the Burgess, Hoyt, or Ullman-Harris. And so concentric means like you have the middle of the city, downtown area where most of the services are, and then people sort of live, further and further out. The further out they go, the wealthier they are. Then you have sector, just depends on like which, it's kind of like concentric, but it's just not like perfect circles. It's more of like aligned to the actual like sector that it's in. This is unit 7, yes. Multi-nuclei cities is just because there's like more than one little like nodes or hubs. A galactic city, it means that the inner city itself is surrounded by a large suburban and residential and business areas. Then the actual like world regional models, Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, they look different than what cities look like in North America because of culture and historical factors. So like in Europe, you might have more of a like the middle of the city is not necessarily like downtown, now where how we know it in the US. It's more of like the like historical center of the city. In Africa, in the Middle East, you might have more of like markets in the middle of the city, like traditional markets, or like religious services in the middle of the city. Are there FRQs about these models? There can be. There for sure can be. And to be honest, I haven't really seen too many about these, so this would be a good, this could be one. Okay, so no matter what, where people live in the city reflects the culture and the technology that they're capable of and the cycles of development. The way that the city is connected depends on infrastructure, like planes, trains, cars, subways, buses, scooters, Uber, any of those things. And then, of course, like water and sewer systems. Okay. Sustainable design initiatives. We're trying to make cities more sustainable. Trying to use different areas for residences and for commercial. So, you can see like stores with like apartments up top, or like really smart growth policies. So new urbanism, right? Creating space, like building gardens on top of buildings, making sure there's bike paths so that less people are using cars and more people are using bikes. And so this is, I don't have time to, thank you for that. Don't have time to summarize, put unit 4 right now. So this is sort of where, this was a whole question on an FRQ just about new urbanism a few years ago. Everyone freaked out because they were like, they studied everything else. Analytics on demographic composition. So like the actual characteristic of populations and demographics are changing, right? We're like sort of getting more diverse, possibly getting younger, getting more like even like mixed race. Okay, and then you can understand a city based on quantitative data, so like census, survey data, and qualitative data, which is like people writing narratives or going into the field and observing different groups of people. All right, this is it. Urban challenges. So as cities grow, they face more challenges, right? So they might face things like housing discrimination, affordability of housing. It's incredibly expensive to live in cities now. Like if you're going to live in San Francisco, it's going to cost you almost $2,000 for one bedroom, which is a problem. Access to food stores. So some regions don't have access to a grocery store. They buy their food at like a liquor store on the corner that doesn't have healthy food, but that's where you have to buy your food. Getting access to public services and can be difficult if you don't live close to it. Gentrification, where you see like, Whole Foods and Starbucks moving in, nicer condos moving in. It's pushing people out that have lived there before because they can no longer affect the they can no longer afford the rent. Some of the like land use and environmental issues are like suburban sprawl, where it's just like growing too fast outward. And so some ways that you can affect that is by like determining some land to be like a park that can't be used for any other reason than a park. And it sort of limits that. So instead of growing out fast and just keep building outward, you instead have to like use the land that you have. Trying to fix the like quality of water and air and, protect the earth. Okay, so these are all of the, all right, so we talked about all of this. I'm going to go all the way back to, leave it on this slide for a minute. If you guys were asking, what is so tomorrow we're going to be talking about multiple choice questions. We're going to do practice questions. We'll probably put up another like live trivia game so that you can practice multiple choice and know strategies to attack it. And Dustin will be here at 6 p.m. tomorrow Eastern time to talk about multiple choice. Sunday night, we're going to be doing FRQs, practice FRQs, so that you know the strategy to attack it. FRQs are pretty straightforward, but it's, we want to make sure that you know like exactly how to write it. And then Monday, last night before the test, is just like, we'll be here again just to answer any last minute questions and do anything you need to. All of these things are part of Fiveable Plus. Is Fiveable Plus worth it? Yeah, it's totally worth it. So like it's $5 a month. It's $5 to get you through this, this time. And for you guys, you're in, what APs are you taking next year? Like hit me in the chat with some APs you're taking next year. And then I'm going to put a link down here for it too. AP Chem, AP World, Fiveable Plus. So next year, we're going to have a ton more. All of these AP subjects we're going to have. Next year, we're going to have a ton of teachers teaching these courses. So, this year what we did is we had like one teacher per subject every week live streaming. Next year, we're going to have a lot more teachers streaming all the time. And so no matter what time zone you're in, no matter what AP subject you're taking, you can always find a stream that could be happening that can help you get through the year. So that, the way you feel so stressed right now, you shouldn't feel that stressed. If you're kind of studying throughout the year, we'll help you get through your tests, help you get through your, here we go. Helping you get through all the different things that, that you need. If you are then 6 APs, damn. If over the summer, we're going to be doing Camp Fiveable. Camp Fiveable, to do a couple things. One, to just kind of have some fun because it's summertime and doing like all kinds of things like fun discussions that we never have time to talk about during the school year. Like let's actually talk through Game of Thrones and talk about some of the like historical power structures that we see. Like, let's cut through some really like popular songs and break them down and talk about how they're important. Talk about like, let's do like lessons about personal finance. How do you keep track of money? How do you know how to handle all of it? How do you, maybe you're interested in learning some other like things around the summertime, right? Like you just want to like boost it up. And so Fiveable Plus is $5 a month, any month. So Camp Fiveable is going to be the same thing. It's going to be $5 a month. So you sign up now, it's $5, and then we're going to be keep doing things all summer to keep you learning, to keep you, talking about things. We'll do current events. We'll talk about what's happening. Like there's a lot going on with like our Constitution even. And over the summer, it could be even crazy. So we will talk about some of those things to keep you engaged, and then also preparing you for the new AP classes that you're taking. So, a lot of you are taking AP World. You're going to have a summer assignment for AP World. We want to be here for you to help you with it, to make sure that you know how to take notes, I want you to start AP World ready for it, feeling like I got this, like I feel prepared. I know the different things that I need to do in order to do well in AP World all year, because you'll have your teacher and your class, but then you'll also have Fiveable Plus teachers to make it even better for you throughout the year. And as you see right now, we have a little chat box in Fiveable, and so next year we'll be able to answer kind of your questions all the time. We'll have TAs that are in there who took these classes before, who got 5s in them, that can answer your questions any time of the day. It's pretty dope. So if you're not yet a member of Fiveable Plus, click the link, the little Fiveable Plus bubble, or if you're inside of Fiveable right now, you can sign up anywhere in there. It's $5 a month. Well, someone said it's cheaper than Apple Music and Spotify and Netflix. And I really wish that I had it when I was in high school, because I'm sitting on like $80,000 worth of student debt right now. And if I had just taken more AP classes and passed them, I wouldn't have had that problem. At least not as much. And there's an app. And we're going to be spending this summer doing a ton of work making the app even better, even more useful, more trivia questions, all kinds of stuff, y'all. So there is one tomorrow. Yep. So the next 3 sessions are for Fiveable Plus members only. It keeps them small. It makes it so that we can really get to all your questions, because I know there's a lot of questions tonight that I didn't get to. And so Dustin will really be able to help you out and answer all those questions for you. So multiple choice tomorrow, FRQ on Sunday, last minute questions on Monday. So I'll drop the link in right here so you've got it. Me/5. And if your parents have questions about Fiveable Plus, tell them to hit us up. They can email us directly. Tomorrow's review. So this is the last free human geography session. I was actually going to put this behind the Fiveable Plus, but we decided to give this one to everyone. So if you're still not feeling super ready, I highly recommend hopping in for the weekend, because every single slide that I just went over has like an entire replay. And on the replay, you can click to just go to where I answered a question or where Dustin talked specifically about a topic. And so there's like 30 reviews for Human Geo and all the slides that are attached to them. And you can click through the timestamps for it. All right, hit me in the chat. How do you feel right now for human geography? Give me a 1 through 5. How do you feel if the test were tomorrow? How would you feel for it? And then I got to end this session at exactly 2 hours. A lot better, 4 or 5-ish, so much more confident. That's the biggest thing, y'all. At Fiveable, we really want to make sure that you are confident going into exams. You know, we can go over as much content as we want. We can do practice essays. We can do all this stuff. But ultimately, we want to make sure that you're confident and that you feel ready for this. So You can go to YouTube and you can get, content, but if you want a teacher really just like calming you down, come through. All right, so I'm gonna see you guys later. Good luck on your test. We'll be live throughout the weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye. Teachers like you give me hope. Yeah, man, we got this. All right, peace out.